Hey everyone, so it's a nice Sunday winter's morning, and today I'm going to go to the very far back of my woodland and do a hydroelectric survey of the stream at the back. I've got permission from the person that the stream's on the boundary to put in hydroelectric, and yeah, so I'm going to move forward with it. I did a video about it a while ago about the potential, and I'm finally going to actually put it in, because with the new workshop and the bigger tools that I planned, having the extra power is going to be really helpful. The tools and equipment I use are now a little bit more advanced, but when I first did it, and a few surveys I've done since for customers, I just used this. This is all you really need to map out a hydroelectric system's head, and it essentially works by having some water in a, well, this isn't clear anymore, but a clear tube, and the water will always level itself, so you'll have two level lines. And you can sight down those two level lines, lining up by moving your head up and down and sighting down those lines to this stick, which has numbers on it, that's positioned somewhere downhill. I usually work downhill, and as you sight down, the two lines will line up with the position on this stick, and that tells you the elevation difference, because these two things are calibrated to each other. So you line up your water level with the 0 point. So if the stick ends up sitting that much higher, and you sight through your 2 bits of water and you're on 3, that means you've got a 300mm difference in this case, because it's 100mm intervals. And that works perfectly well. And I used that for a long time. It was getting a little bit embarrassing turning up to customers' houses with that equipment. Although it works absolutely fine, I now use a little bit more advanced equipment. So I have a proper tripod which has a calibrated auto leveling sight on it. It goes on there. And then stick. Same principle, identical principle in fact. This sees in straight lines, so does your eyes. Same as this, auto leveling. This does it with a complex mechanism. This does it using physics and water. Exactly the same principle. If this shines at this, and say this is a lot higher than that is, it will point at a mark on here. Then we just need to deduct the height of this from the ground, and that will tell us our difference. I say the only reason I now use this is because it looks more professional, and in some scenarios it would be marginally more accurate, but in an undulating woodland of leapfrogging the equipment, I don't think there's much accuracy difference, to be honest with you. They both were going to get you within about 5%. But yeah, this is what we use today because I'm used to using it now and it looks more professional. As far as measuring out the pipe lengths and stuff, when I first started I just used a tape measure, this one actually, that Doc got me from a charity shop, and just did it in 50-metre increments, because 50-metre tape I think, yeah. Now, again, to look a bit more professional and be a bit more efficient, I use a wheel, a measuring wheel. So the equipment's changed and upgraded a bit, but you can do what I'm doing today with a stick with some graduations on it and a bit of clear tube and a 50-metre tape, and a tape measure and a bucket and a stopwatch, that sort of thing. You don't need much equipment. So yeah, we're going to go up into the far woodland and start taking the head measurements. We need measurements of the head available, the elevation between the top and the bottommost point. We need the flow data, we need the pipe length, and normally I would take the cable length as well, but in this scenario it's going to terminate down at my original turbine where there's already a cable, so I don't need the cable length. So yeah, all we need now is a notepad and a pen, and we can go and start. Whole family walking up to the top. Bit of a trek, Puss, you sure you want to come? Okay. Right, so we're up at my current intake, so this is the one that we've been using for years. And we're going through, all of us that is, Pussycat, all the gear, Dot, film camera lady and stick holder, we're going through there, which is a bit dense and a bit of a jungle. So we've got water sources all over this bit of land, and this little one here that feeds down into this little ditch, this is ultimately the one that goes underneath my hydroelectric building. It starts up the top here, then gets bigger as it goes through our woodland, and you know, it gets to be quite a torrent of water sometimes when it's raining. But yeah, that's what this one is. The cat's still following along. Right, good girl? Right, so I'm at the stream, I'm crouching down so you can see it. Now it's a good 4 or 5 metres down in this ravine. It's carved out a big deep ravine, and I want to go that way with my pipe, but I can't come out of an intake and go straight uphill because no water will flow up it. So I'm doing 2 things now. I'm going to work out the difference in elevation between the very top of here and the very bottom, but I also need to work out at what point I've got a gradual downhill enough so that I can get the pipe out of the stream and start going in the direction that I want to go in. So I'm going to be doing those 2 things at once. So that there in that corner, that is my boundary. So that's our highest point that we can use. And you can see the flow is quite good up here. So let's get in that corner, get set up, and we'll start measuring our elevations. Right, so Dot is off down there with the stick, the measuring stick, and I'm going to go in there with my site equipment, and we're going to start taking measurements down the stream for now until we can get back out again. So I've got to get this level. I have a little level I'm looking at here. Get it close, like that. Dot is now way down there, and she's extending the stick up, and I'm going to sight down it and see that stick. Right, so I got my measurement. So now I need to take note of what that was. So I could see 4 metre point on the stick. So I do 4, and I do minus what my stand height is. 1.1. So 4 minus 1.1 is what I've got so far. Right, so now I'm going to get set up where Dot was at the same height, and we're going to leapfrog our way down, taking the measurements as we go and recording them. And you can see that the you're right there, my love. You see that it starts to level out soon, and I want to try and get out of this stream at some point, but I think it might be too soon yet. We'll see. So if we can avoid it, we never really want to go uphill at any point. We always want to try and keep that pipe downhill. You don't really lose anything going uphill because it goes back down again usually, because what goes up must come down essentially, and we're measuring the difference between the 2 points, so it doesn't really matter. What happens is you'll get airlocks, you need to put a standpipe in, you get sediment in them low points, so ideally we always want to go downhill. Try and show you what I can see, but the sight glass is very small. Let's see if you can see it. I can just see through there. Baby tiger's still with us. Follows us everywhere we go. So cute. So I just discovered that we had a big oak tree come down. So I was back here, when was I back here? Sort of late summer. This was definitely still standing then, so we've had some pretty big storms. It must have come down in them. Pretty big. I don't know whether I'll use it or just leave it for habitat. A fallen oak like that is pretty good habitat, so yeah, we'll see. Yeah, you like it, don't you, girl? Come on, puss. We got to go down that way. It's a big old stump. It's taller than me, that is. It's not saying much, but yeah. Go on, girl. A lovely old tree. Shame it's come down. But that's nature. Did what it did, and that's what has to happen.
Okay, right.
And a 1, and a 2, and a 1, 2, 3. Oh, that was terrible, wasn't it? Oh dear. Go on, you show her how it's done, puss. Right, so we're back down at the hydroelectric point, where the building is, where the turbine. So hopefully if these measurements turn out and work out right, I'm hoping to just go into another separate nozzle and take away one of the nozzles that's already there and have it fed by a separate pipe. I can only do that if the head is relatively similar, because otherwise the RPM of the turbine won't be matched correctly. So we'll work out that now. I've got all my measurements here. So I'll just go and figure out all of that, and then yeah, all my measurements, scrappy bit of paper, we'll work that out. Now I'll run through working out all those different calculations, and then we'll measure the pipe length so I can order the pipe. So I've just gone through what the head measurements are. I'll show it to you all later in detail, but it's 14 meters we have, which is quite a bit different from the 18.5 meters I have in the other stream. So I'm going to go through all that, why that matters in a minute, but for now I'm going back up the top and I'm going to take a reading of the flow measurement, and then I'll get all the information, and then we'll go through all of the numbers and we'll work out if this idea of mine of having 2 separate pipes going into the same turbine will work or not. I found myself a pretty good point to take a flow reading from. So in this stream that's about as good as it's going to get, where it all converges into one place. And I should be able to get this style of bucket to sort of conform to those rocks and take a reading. So let's get down there and do that. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this bucket in this flow until it fills to a set point. So because it's at an angle, that's going to have to be a little bit of a guess, but this bucket's marked with lines on it. So there is 20 litres there, so I'll probably fill it to the 20 litre mark. While I'm doing that, I'm going to get Dot to time it, how many seconds it takes. I'm going to do that a few times and work out how many litres there are per second. So Dot, if you could, as soon as the bucket goes under, start the stopwatch. And as soon as I pull it out, stop it. Yeah? 2, 3, go. Stop. So that is at the 22 litre mark there. How many seconds is that? 3.65. Okay, let's do that again. No, just we'll remember it. Ready again? 1, 2, 3. Stop. Yeah, how many seconds? Right, very consistent. And again. 1, 2, 3. Yep. Oh no, it's a little bit less that. Hang on, do that again. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Yep. Okay. Right, so the mark I was going to on the bucket was at 25 litre mark. So 25 divided by an average of 3.8 seconds. So we're getting 6.5 litres per second. So that there equates to 6.5 litres per second. That's how much, if we took all of that water, put it through the turbine, we'd be putting that much water through there. Right, so now I'm going to walk back up to the very top where I left my measuring wheel, and I'm going to measure out the total length of the penstock, how long it would need to be. Right, I've got my measuring wheel and reset it to 0. I'm now going to walk with this very accurately, because this will dictate actually what pipe I end up ordering, the proposed route of my pipe. The reason it's very important to get that length, not only so you can order it and not be wasteful, but it's also because the longer it is, the more friction there is in it, and the bigger the pipe will need to be in order to make that friction within a reasonable amount. Because the longer the pipe is, the more places there are for water to rub on, and therefore the more friction there is, and therefore the more loss. So the pipe gets longer, the diameter gets bigger. So I need to know exactly what that length is so we can size our pipe, so again, not to be wasteful, but to make sure we don't get too many losses. Right, so I've got our measurement. It's quite difficult in undulating and rough woodland, but that's our measurement. It is 193.3, so we'll have 200 metres of pipe, and that'll be plenty. So at this point now, I would usually, I go from top to bottom, where the powerhouse is going to be, and then once I'm at the bottom, and then reset, and then do the cable run length. But the cable's already here for this system, so I don't need to do that. But I'd usually now make a note of that reset cable run. Cable run's important because, again, distance of the cable matters, because every meter or every centimetre, every millimetre the electrons travel through that cable, they lose energy, and they're going to lose as heat, and they're going to lose more energy the further they have to go. But they're going to lose less energy if we make the cable bigger. So the bigger the cable, the less energy they're going to lose on their way back to where we want the power. So it's important that we know what that distance is, what the power output is, and we can size everything so we don't lose too much. Hey everyone, so it's the next day, and last night I compiled all the findings of our measurements that we did yesterday by surveying the stream at the back. I've got them all here, I'm going to run through that. I'm not going to run through how to actually calculate things like power output and pipe friction and stuff like that, because there's loads of videos about that, and there's loads of online calculators that you can use, so you can just put in your head and flow and it'll tell you how much power you're going to produce. And the equation to do it's quite simple anyway. That stuff is relatively easy to do, like I say, all these online calculators. So I'm not going to go through that and make the video too long, and it's unnecessary. What there isn't out there online is many videos about how to actually collect that information, which is what this one's all about. So what I do when I go and do a survey is I do what I showed you yesterday in the video, and then I compile a document, which in this case is going to be a bit more simple than normal because it's not starting from scratch or involving any costs. But normally I would try and put all my findings into perspective for the customer, and then lay out what my estimated costs would be for all of the work. But yeah, that's what I've done in this document. I've done one for myself for this second pipe, and I'm going to run through that with you now. So warning to anyone, if you're not into the numbers around hydroelectric and the information of what I'm likely to get as far as outputs and stuff from this new pipe run, then don't bother watching, because it's going to be probably 10 minutes of numbers. Right then, so let's run through some of the numbers that we found yesterday when we took some measurements, and I'll try and explain what they mean a little bit as well. So head, we've got 14 metres, that was measured just down from the boundary, and that's probably a pretty conservative estimate, but 14 metres is going to be within about 5%. We measured a flow of 6.7 litres per second. The penstock length is 200 metres. And the power output of that, 4 litres per second, because I don't want to use all of it, at 4 litres per second at 60% efficiency would be 330 watts. The reality is probably be closer to 300. 60% is actually a really high target. I think when I calculated it earlier, it was looking like more like 55% overall by the time you actually get to use the power, so about 300 watts. The original system, let's first explain to make sure everyone knows what the score is. So up in the top of my woodland, there's a pipe that comes down into a powerhouse down here, And then in the other corner of the woodland over here, but just a bit lower down, there's another pipe, another stream that flows like this, and I want to take a pipe like this into here to feed a separate nozzle. So there's a turbine in here. This one feeds 3 nozzles currently, and I want to bring another one in, feeding a 4th nozzle to give us more steady flow. And that one feeding 1 nozzle being at slightly lower head is going to cause us a bit of a mismatch, and I'm going to explain why that matters. Right, so yeah, the original system has a head of 18.5 metres, so the first one's 14, the new one's 18.5 metres, and the second stream is a head of 14 metres, yeah. This causes an issue with a mismatch of nozzle velocity to RPM with the 2 different penstocks and nozzles. So why does that matter? So the turbine, when you have a water jet, so we have a turbine here, let's just pretend that's a turbine. I've sort of laid this out before, excuse my terrible drawing. But on the original system, that the water is spraying against these spoons in the turbo turbine at 17.8 meters per second. 17.8 meters a second. Okay. Now the new pipe with its lower head, 14 meters, is going to be spraying on, it'll be on the same turbine, I'm just going to draw it as a different one, but it would be spraying on the turbine at 15.1 meters a second. So we have a mismatch now. So the only way a hydroelectric system can actually catch energy is if the turbine is actually moving slower than the water hitting it. So if this water hits this spoon at 17.8 meters a second and this spoon moves away from it at the same speed, we're going to catch a little bit of rotational energy as far as heat's concerned, but we're not actually going to send any down a cable to a battery bank down here. In order to send any power down this cable to the battery bank, we need to slow down the speed of the turbine so it actually can catch some of that energy. And the relationship of that, the RPM, the speed in which that spoon is moving away from the nozzle velocity, is usually best around 50%, approximately 50%. Sometimes a little bit under, sometimes a little bit over, but approximately 50% depending on which study you read and the turbine design and stuff. So yeah, that turbine spins at half, or that spoon moves away at half the speed of the nozzle velocity. So you can see when we have 2 nozzles or 3 nozzles or 4 nozzles, but one different nozzle, which would be this one, shooting at the same turbine, so say 3 of them are going to be coming in like this at 17.8 meters per second, and one of them is going to be coming in from here at 15 meters per second. So we're going to have a mismatch. So here's our nozzle velocities. Yeah, so the original system at 5 liters per second is 17.8 meters a second nozzle velocity. The velocity of the new system at 4 liters per second would be 15.1 meters per second nozzle velocity. So it's a difference of 15%, 15.1%. So that's not the difference, that's not a power loss, it's a 15.1% mismatch of nozzle velocity to RPM. So the original turbine, the original system is 787 RPM when loaded. So this is under load at 50%, so 50% less RPM than if it was runaway speed, free spinning. The ideal RPM for the new one would be 664 RPM. So there's this mismatch of RPM. Okay. My current penstock has 1 meter of head loss in the penstock due to friction. It's 96.3 millimeter inside diameter pipe, and the loss, that 1 meter loss, is at 5 liters per second. So when water moves through a pipe, you know, the pipe has walls obviously, and as the water moves through this pipe, it rubs on these walls, and as it rubs on the walls, it creates heat and it loses energy. Over a long 200 meter run of pipe, you know, that adds up to being quite a significant loss, and that's why you have to size the pipe big enough. In my system, the original system has 96.3 inner diameter penstock, and that friction loss at 5 liters per second is equivalent to 1 meter of head. 1 meter of head. The new proposed pipe at 78 millimeter inside diameter has a head loss of 1.2 meters, so similar to the other one, at 4 litres per second. If I installed the larger pipe, same size as the original system, then that head loss would be down to 0.5 of a metre, or 500 millimetres. This would help even out that mismatch by 1 metre of head. So if we installed a bigger pipe, this 14 metres, we won't lose it, we won't go down by 1 metre to 13, we'll stay at 14, if that makes sense. Right, so then I wrote out a conclusion as to what that means. The mismatch of nozzle velocities on the two pipes is 15%. This means that the turbine would not be spinning at its optimum speed. If I installed a 90mm pipe, then the loss in the pipe at the design flow of 4 litres per second is 1.2 metres. This is the figure if the pipe size and pipe size that gives the 15% mismatch. So if I install the 90mm pipe, which has the internal diameter of 78 millimeters, then I get that 15% mismatch. If I installed the 110 millimeter pipe, which is a much bigger pipe, much larger cross-sectional area, then the mismatch would go down to 12%. Because I don't lose a meter of head, that extra meter that I don't lose comparative to the meter that I do lose in the other system means that mismatch goes down, because I'm losing in the other system due to head loss, and I'm not hardly losing anything in the new system, so that mismatch is now only 12%. There's 500 millimeters of extra head to be gained if I push that intake. Where I started from is not the edge of the boundary. There's another 5 meters or so. I just wanted to stay away from the edge, but if I push the intake right back, right to the edge of my boundary, so that's the boundary, if I put it right on the edge of the boundary, I can get another 500 millimeters of head. Pushing up very edge of the boundary, and I can get an additional 500 millimeters because I need to mount the intake to something, so I can raise up a 500 millimeter little dam as well. It can be found by installing a 500 millimeter dam to mount the intake to. This would give an extra 1 meter of head and take the mismatch down to 9.4%. This means that the new nozzle velocity will be 9.4% lower than the nozzle velocity fed from the other pipe. This is not a 9.4% loss. It's not a loss, it's a RPM mismatch. That would equate to approximately 5% loss. Okay? So loss of power over there being the correct relationship between nozzle velocities and RPM. This could also be a loss. There could also be a loss effect on the other nozzles, but as my turbine is MPPT, which is maximum power point tracking, the controller would find the RPM that was most efficient, and that would be the RPM that was being produced by the nozzles, the highest energy output at full flow. That would mean the original nozzles, and lower flow, it would be the new nozzles. Sorry, I'm trying to read sort of half an angle here. Where are we? Be the new nozzles. The highest energy, the new nozzles. So yeah, the relationship would change depending on flow, exactly. Installing larger pipe and gaining 1 meter of head gains 5% less mismatch. Now I need to decide whether that is worthwhile or not. What I know for sure is having a second turbine, because that is an option, is feed a second turbine completely separate from the original one. But if we do that, we're going to lose 20% of our energy instantly, just in losses of the alternator, losses in the actual turbine itself, losses in cable, losses. We're going to lose at least 20% just before we've even taken it to the batteries. Okay, just in the turbine and alternator. So this mismatch will result in less losses than 20%, even with the mismatch of the new pipe running at a non-optimal RPM and a slight mismatch. We're not going to lose 20% of our power due to that. So it's still better than having a second turbine. Even if I run a smaller sized pipe, I also don't have to make another turbine or run another cable. So the second pipe is preferable despite the mismatch, and the turbine output average will go up by 300 watts. Putting the total full flow output to 800 watts. So if everything's running at full, we'll now be at 800 as opposed to 500, and the 300 watt higher average over the year. The cost of going one pipe size up is 700 quid to go to gain 5% power. To gain a 5% less mismatch in loss. Yeah, 5% power loss. Sorry, is 700 quid, which is significant. But the main cost comes in work. The 110mm pipe is almost twice the weight and much harder to unroll. The proposed pipe location is very far from the back of the woods and hard to get to. So a smaller pipe is going to make the install a lot easier. And the loss of power used in the smaller pipe is around 23 watts in friction loss, plus the slight loss due to the mismatch, which again is about 5%. So, you know, we're losing like maybe 10% in if I install the smaller pipe, which is easy. I can put the smaller pipe in quite easily. The bigger pipe, really not that easy at all. We're looking at about 10% loss overall with the smaller pipe. After considering all factors, I'm going to install 90mm OD pipe and a custom-made spear valve rated to run at 4 litres per second at full flow and bring the turbine average up by 300 watts. The extra work and cost of the next pipe size up is not worth the small gain. I don't believe it is. It's a significant amount of money, significant amount of work, significant amount of environmental impact, because it's literally like twice the size of the pipe, and we only gain, it's 23 watts of theoretical output plus the mismatch. You know, we're looking at maybe 30, 40 watts maximum. Okay, so I don't think it's worth it in this scenario. I'll try and maximize the head by installing a small dam though. So I'm going to try and change this mismatch as much as I can by, you know, a small dam, and try and get that mismatch closer together. Where are we? The stream at the back of the woods will run all year round. This is another key factor. Even in the height of summer, there will be enough water to run the turbine at about 100 watts. This means it will be producing 300 watts more on average for 7 months of the year when the whole thing's running, and 2.4 kilowatt hours per day extra, because 100 watts times 24 is 2.4 kilowatt hours per day over the other 5 months. So we've now got 5 months of runtime extra, albeit only low because it's only 100 watts, but we do have 5 months of extra runtime at 100 watts, which is 2.4 kilowatt hours a day. This should give a total yearly increase in output of 1,872 kilowatt hours. This is what we can expect after making the upgrade. If we put that into perspective, that could charge a Tesla Model S for with a 100 kilowatt hour battery 18.72 times and drive the car 5,600 miles. So that's the sort of energy we're looking at creating here with just the purchase of a small pipe, really, 90mm pipe. In the UK, the average CO2 produced by producing electricity is 0.23 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour. I think that's correct, that's what I looked up. This means that my hydro output will be saving 436 kilograms of CO2 per year over the conventional power produced in the UK. There is initial environmental cost to the pipe, but that is soon paid off as far as CO2 is concerned. The pipe will last for decades. The power from the new system is necessary to power my workshop and make turbines that will also be producing power, so the environmental cost is really negligible when you consider that as well, because this power is actually going to be used to make hydroelectric turbines that produce power as well themselves. Right, well that's my conclusions. Yeah, sorry if that's a bit long. I know some people aren't that interested in that, but a lot of people are, and this channel is about entertainment and education, so yeah, you know, if they're not interested in that, don't watch it. But yeah, you know, when you're looking at putting in a hydroelectric system, the costs are fairly high generally. You know, pipe and stuff is expensive, turbines are expensive to make, there's a lot of work goes into it. You need to know exactly what you're going to get before you start. I did it in my first system. I was absolutely spot on with the measurements. Hopefully I am with this as well. And after looking at it all, we can assess that if we put in a bigger pipe, then, you know, we're going to get more. But the small amount we're going to get, although it would add up to a lot over the years, in this situation doesn't warrant it. If I could go and collect the pipe, the larger size pipe on my trailer, I could drive it to where it needs to be, and all the work was pulling it in, then I would do it, but I can't do that. It has to come, that size pipe has to come on a lorry. It have to be winched right the way through the woods. It's a really big job to do that. So in that respect, the smaller size, able to go on my trailer, I'm able to drive it much closer to where it needs to go, and the install is possible, like, you know, is reasonable rather than unworthwhile. So we're going to go with that smaller size, and the losses are small. We're looking at 30 watts loss over the bigger pipe, something along those lines. So yeah, that's how I do this hydroelectric survey. I take all my measurements, I summarise it, I try and look at all aspects of, you know, perfection in a hydroelectric system is possible, but it is costly. And the purpose, my job when I do a survey is to work out whether those costs are warranted, environmentally and economically. And that's what I try and do, that's what I've laid out here. And it shows us that for not a huge cost, we can increase our average output over the year to be quite a significant amount more. We can spend much more money and get that average a little bit higher, but that sometimes isn't worthwhile. You know, that extra money spent on that pipe could buy a lot of solar panels and increase our average over the summer, and our average over the winter is now going to be more than enough to run the workshop. So yeah, that's my conclusions. So I hope you enjoyed the video, hope it was helpful, and yeah, look forward to reading your comments. Okay, see you later.